Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Mojo Moment, where we visit the intersection of purpose and profit, talking to entrepreneurs and learning where along their journey they found their Mojo Moment, that realization that business is also about purpose. I'm Lisa Bowman, Chief Mojo Officer at Marketing Mojo. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different, so I want to do some setup. You may notice that I have two guests. That's right, two of them you're not seeing double. My guests today are folks that I've met as I leaned in to do some pro bono consulting with their organization, the Bronx Community Foundation. Now, I've been to New York, as many of you have, a million times. I've actually never been to the Bronx. So I have this perception of the Bronx and what the Bronx was. I know it's where Cardi B and J-Lo are from. I know that both Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren were born and raised in the Bronx. It has produced political figures like Colin Powell, Sonia Sotomayor, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But what I didn't know is that the Bronx in and of itself is a community that, if it were a city, it would be the 9th largest city in the country. It's also ranked as the 62nd unhealthiest county in New York by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. It's a very diverse community, 88% diverse, leaning heavily towards West African and Latinx. 200,000 kids were not able to homeschool during COVID because they didn't have access to either the assets or infrastructure from a technology perspective to allow them to do that. The Bronx was the epicenter in New York of COVID. New York in and of itself being the epicenter of COVID. It is one of the hungriest places in America, and it has health challenges when we are facing a respiratory virus. It's known as Asthma Alley. Location-wise, it's sandwiched in between industry and freeways. So my guests today, Desmon and Derrick Lewis, are the founders of the Bronx Community Foundation, and we're going to talk just a little bit about what's happening in that community. I wanted to give them a chance to lift up their story, talk about what's happening in this community, and quite frankly, use this platform as an opportunity to ask for your help in leaning in to support this. So Desmon, Derrick, welcome.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Great.
Hey, I wore something special for you guys.
Fantastic.
Yep. As I said, you guys both have day jobs. This was not something that you needed to do. It's not really a business per se for you. So can you share with me a little bit about how you got started? What was it that inspired you to start this?
Derrick?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, Lisa. You know, the idea of the Bronx Community Foundation really came about a few years ago. We noticed, having born and raised in the South Bronx, that although there are a lot of great organizations that exist in the Bronx continues to be at the bottom of the list as it pertains to how you measure the prosperity of a community. As you referenced, the 62nd unhealthiest county, large food insecure community, digital desert, et cetera. And so we wondered why that was the case with proximity to, one of the richest parts of the world, Manhattan. Right in Manhattan's backyard was the South Bronx that had a lot of systemic and institutional issues. And so we decided we wanted to do something different that was non-traditional. A lot of people, when they think about philanthropy, they think about mentoring and planting a tree or, working with nonprofits in a way. But we knew we wanted to do something that would change the systemic and institutional issues that have been plaguing the Bronx for decades. We like to say that although the Bronx is going through a health pandemic today, the Bronx has really been going through a pandemic of poverty for decades. And so we wanted to do our part to really change that.
And you're right, it's got all of the systemic issues that we talk about, right? It has health challenges, food insecurity, digital desert, all of those things really combine, especially when you've got the situation that we have going on now, to kind of create that perfect storm that takes an already challenged community and pushes it further into a place of need. So,
yeah, and I think, from my perspective, whilst I think COVID-19 has shined a light on the fact that the Bronx has been a community in need for decades, for Derrick and I think this, it's really deep rooted in what we believe. We were both, we like to say we are products of philanthropy. If it weren't for nonprofit organizations that believed and helped us, we really don't know where we would be today. And so I want to just pay homage to that as well. I mean, from our family perspective as well, we have a family full of people who've given back to the community their whole lives. Our mother's worked in the public sector her entire life. Our father, he was a civil rights activist within the construction industry. Our grandmother and our aunt both worked at Bronx hospitals for 40 plus years. And so we were raised in a household and a family that always said, you have to, you must give back to the community. You must give back to people who have helped you. And so for us, whilst, we have a purpose now with COVID and a number of other, systemic issues that we want to face, this has really been something we've been doing since we were, children.
Right. So it actually runs in your family.
It does. It's deep rooted in our family. Yeah.
So, we talked for a minute about the fact that you both have day jobs. This wasn't something you necessarily needed to do. You felt this sense of purpose, this obligation, right? You knew that this was your calling to give back because it's part of how you were raised and your values. Where along the way do you think that you encountered your mojo moment, that realization that, this is something that we can do. We're business people, we have skills, we can use those skills in a bit of a different way.
Moment was a few years ago when we knew, or we identified that, with the Bronx being in Manhattan's backyard, and there are resources being given to the Bronx, why wasn't the entirety of the Bronx moving forward in a prosperous manner? And so the mojo moment for us was, we both, in consultant and finance, and we said, we wanted to use the skills that we have to give back to our community in a way that wasn't, again, traditional giving back, but systemic and institutional change. And so one of the things we noticed through talking to community leaders is really understanding the fact that the organizations that do great work in the Bronx, there wasn't an opportunity for them to collaborate in a way that pushed the prosperity of the borough forward. And so one of the operating models we identified was the fact that, a community foundation at its core sort of plays that role. And we were surprised to see that the Bronx didn't have its own community foundation. The community of the greatest need did not have an institution that can play an unbiased, objective role to foster collaboration among the great institutions that were already doing work in the Bronx. And so we sparked the idea of the Bronx Community Foundation to be that institution that can gather and collaborate, or be the institution that could foster collaboration among those organizations that are doing great work for the prosperity of the entirety of the borough.
And that's a model that, given my background as the former CMO of United Way, that cross-collaboration, cross-sector model is something that's really, really familiar to me, because that's very much A, how we worked, and B, it's the model that you truly need to be successful, right? It takes everybody leaning in to do their piece and their part. And I was super surprised when you guys told me that the Bronx didn't have a community foundation. That to me was kind of incredible. So I'm just so inspired by what you two have done. I'm going to suggest that we actually take a quick break and then come back and finish this up. I'd like to understand what you deem success for the Community Foundation and what that looks like, short-term, mid-term, long-term. And if somebody wants to get engaged, if they want to lean in and help, whether that's with $1 million contribution or whatever, where is it that we find you to do that? So we're going to take a quick break and come back for part 2 of this episode of The Mojo Moment.